This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
In each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Emma Cogan, one of the founders of Monstrous Femme. She is also a filmmaker and costume designer responsible for the looks in Fanatico and Camp Calypso, and is a wardrobe assistant on the upcoming Nicolas Cage film, Peg. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Some cool projects, huh? Nicolas Cage movie. That'll...
Yeah, that was really fun. That was my first, relatively bigger gig. I was still, of course on, the lower tier, but I got a lot of amazing experience, and it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be an interesting film. I will say that.
Yeah, I was looking at the IMDb page for it. I was like, wow, that sounds wild.
Something.
Absolutely. It was one of the strangest experiences of my life. It was thrilling.
I can bet.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But before we kind of do get into the now, let's take it back to childhood. How did you get introduced to horror?
So I got introduced to horror through my dad, for sure. He was feeding me all different kinds of B movies and classic horror when I was a kid. And we would also ironically watch ghost hunting shows.
Which my favorite thing to do of all time.
Oh my God. Seriously? I have, a very unironic, actually it's ironic, but I now it's a part of my personality now that, I'm obsessed with Zak Bagans because he's hilariously awful.
Oh my God, I know. Zak Bagans. Oh, this is so funny. I love Zak Bagans. Again, because he's terrible. My little brother loved to watch Ghost Adventures, and
yes.
I love to watch Ghost Hunters. So
Ghost
we would
Hunters
always
is the good one.
The good one with the Roto-Rooter plumbers.
Yes, exactly.
And so we would argue about which one was better because I loved the wholesome plumber boys, and he loved Zak Bagans and his horrible tattoos, and it was
Monster
a very
energy drink.
Yes.
Ghost hunting.
Come fight me, bro. Come fight me, bro.
Oh my God. That's amazing. I feel like when I found 2 people in my life that get this ironic, unironic ghost hunting, passion. But I love Ghost Hunters, love the Roto-Rooters. My dad and I, that's what we started watching. We started with Ghost Hunters because it was the OG show. And then when we discovered Ghost Adventures, we were just like, holy shit, who are these people? It was just this is insane. And I quote the theme song on a daily basis because it's so heinous. But I'm very glad you get this. So I started.
I do.
we would watch a lot of that. It was like a source of entertainment, but I did also genuinely like find like paranormal and unknown stuff intriguing. And so, yeah, it was kind of just like we would do this kind of like funny stuff, and we would also watch, you know, very well-made classic horror movies. And it wasn't really it was like, it was very just like fun entertainment for me. And then when I was a teen, I developed an interest in film and filmmaking, kind of outside of horror initially. Like I kind of just considered myself, like a horror and sci-fi fan, and then also a filmmaker and someone who wanted to pursue film. And a lot of the films that like I wanted to make, the ideas I had were relatively like psychological and dark and twisted. And for some reason, it took me a very long time to realize that horror was also that, all of those things. And so, yeah, I kind of started out with just like, oh, this is really fun. And then I had the interest in making films. And then when I was like 16, I sort of made the connection really of like, oh, like horror is kind of the place where I can truly like express the themes and combine my interest in like the fun, exciting parts of horror while also kind of making films that explore more like cathartic themes and trauma processing and psychological elements that I really wanted to explore. And so that's kind of where those melded for me. But yeah, it's just kind of been a fun developing thing where I was like, horror is so fun. And then I realized horror's actually terrifying. And I love that about it.
And that was like a lot of how I dealt with with getting into horror at my age too, because not my age, getting into horror when I was younger was like, this is kind of scary, but kind of cheesy with the ghost shows. And there's also like commercial breaks. So you get a break from it. So yeah. I feel that very hard.
Yeah. So Emma, do you believe in ghosts?
You know, that's a good question. I want to say no, but I also want to say yes. I feel like there's a lot we don't know. But I definitely don't believe in ghosts in like the Ghost Adventure sense. Frankly, not even in the Ghost Hunters sense. But, something I did find really fascinating that I probably like bi-monthly will bring up since I saw this episode was, the Ghost Hunters episode where they went to, I believe it was the hotel that The Shining was filmed in. And there was this like EVP recording that they caught where I was just like, I don't know, I think about it all the time. And it was basically like the voice that they caught, the phenomenon that they caught was like responding to what they were saying in real time. And the voice itself was actually like really confused and was like, they were like, oh, is this specific woman that's supposed to be in this specific room here with us? And the voice was like, what did it say? It was like, of course I'm here. What are you doing here? Like, where are you? And not only is it like humorous, but I also just like, I don't know. It's kind of been something where I was like, I wonder if there's some sort of weird like time hole or, you know,
cut to 6 states later, 6 states away where someone is on like a ham radio going, yeah. I'm here.
I know. I was like, I wonder if there's something like, like some sort of weird like time vortex thing, or is it just entirely made up and that was like someone in their radio. They're like talking. It just happened to be an extreme coincidence. So I don't know. I would say I don't believe in ghosts. Some things fascinate me, but I'm also very skeptical, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
I believe in ghosts.
Yeah. Mary Beth believes in them. I do not. So I'm always curious.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle. I'm right in the middle of you guys.
There you go.
So what do you, if it wasn't this movie we're talking about today, what was your first horror movie? Do you remember?
It was probably Bride of Frankenstein. I remember watching that with my grandpa. Like, I remember watching it with him, which sounds really cute, but he was like, I remember him just like not knowing what's going on.
Oh.
And like, cause we watched it again. We watched it when I was like fairly young because it was my dad and my grandpa. And then, several years later when I was a little older and he was in a retirement home, they were having like a cute little movie night at his Jewish retirement home. And so I went with him. They were showing Bride of Frankenstein. And I just remember being like, oh my God, none of these people know what's happening. It's so scary, but they all enjoyed it a lot. And so that's probably my earliest one the correlation with my grandpa, which is kind of funny.
And so aside from what we're talking about today, what were some of the other films that really reminded you, really scared you when you were a kid, that like really got you the kind of the same way that Orphan did?
I would say, it's hard to say because it kind of took me a while to get really freaked out by a horror film. There's definitely like classic horror was creepy to me, but it never I think it just took me a while, to appreciate like black and white films. It took me until I was, a little older. And so I would say that a lot of like the Universal monster classics there was an element that did freak me out. I think honestly, like a lot of the Frankenstein movies were what really, sticks in my mind as like, oh yeah, that really freaked me out. Oh, I guess Creature from the Black Lagoon, I think, was one of the first times I saw special effects that really jarred me.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, ooh, and now I can see the special effects and it doesn't scare me as much. But when I was a kid and I saw it, I was just like, what is that? Like, I fully thought it was real. And so, yeah, that kind of sticks in my mind. Just kind of like growing up on that. And then, yeah, I would definitely say seeing special effects when I was younger was really like the parts that did stick with me, at like a formative age of just being like, oh my God, are these things real? And so, eventually I grew out of that and knew that they weren't, but, I'd like to believe they are.
So what draws you to horror as an adult now?
As an adult, I really, still stick with what I sort of developed realized when I was a teen, which was that I really want to explore horror and sci-fi and use it as kind of a platform and a tool to kind of explore psychological themes, go deeper into the human condition and push that to its limit. And that's what really draws me to horror films in general. That's kind of like my favorite type of horror film is a psychological film.
Gotcha.
And that's also the kinds of films that I want to make, is kind of films that really, I don't know, just push the narrative past just like, I love really fun, wacky horror films. I love a good 80s slasher, but I also, really do appreciate the kind of catharsis that you can get when kind of seeing a protagonist in a horror film go through an entire arc, basically of processing trauma, I find to be really satisfying. And also I think it can be very healing. And so that's kind of the angle I look at horror and how I like to explore it and the kinds of themes that draw me into a film.
Cool. Do you get scared as an adult watching horror, or are you to the point of being jaded like a lot of us?
Oh man, I do feel pretty jaded. I have to watch I don't know. Like I said, psychological films probably draw me the most into horror because of their ability to actually scare me. I think that it needs to feel pretty real for it to scare me, or deal with very real themes to truly scare me. That doesn't negate, my love of, fun, wacky horror. But yeah, definitely Midsommar jarred me.
I was going to ask what films you would consider of that ilk.
Yeah, definitely Midsommar. Midsommar and Hereditary, I think, are really, everyone says this, but I would say, those films for me felt very, especially Midsommar, just immediately attacking my brain. And then,
oh yes,
from the first 20 minutes of Midsommar, you're just like, oh God.
It starts off fuck you. This is what's going to happen the rest of this movie. And you're like, all right.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Exactly. And I think that's what I like, films that stick in my brain, and that I have to sort of gnaw on or chew on for a few days, or, films where I can really dissect, and really go into the themes there. And I don't know, maybe it's selfish to say that I mainly like films that, appeal to very specific themes that I've, explored in my life, but you know, I don't know. I'm definitely not above like fun horror, but like slashers don't really scare me. I mean, I can identify when things are creepy, but you know, I mean, maybe it is because like we all watch so many horror films that, you know, you can still enjoy the experience, but not always maybe, I don't know, feel like you're living in a nightmare, which I guess is the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've talked a lot about loving like psychological horror movies.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite horror movies now as an adult?
Ooh, some of my favorite horror movies now. I love Alucarda. Absolutely love Alucarda. I also really like Possession.
Yeah,
Those two. Possession is like peak psychological horror, I think. I think that's
it's
like
a perfect movie.
pretty god tier. Yeah. It is a perfect movie. And yeah, I love House, the Japanese horror film. That's kind of where I love surrealist imagery, and I have always wanted to do really like wacky, like outlandish visual things in films. And that was like one of the first movies that I saw like a horror film do that. It is absolutely wild. It is pure fever dream.
I haven't seen the whole thing. I need to.
So weird.
There's no reason. I think I would too, because the parts I've seen, I'm like, this is absolutely everything I love. Like, it's just colorful and bonkers, and there's a cat. Like,
exactly. That is
there's a
everything
piano that
I love
eats
about
people.
it. Yeah. It's amazing.
So fucking wild.
I love it. Well, and it's also, I believe that movie was actually like based on a fever dream that the director's like daughter had, which makes it better.
I would believe that.
Yeah, it's like
I would
actually
believe that.
a fever dream.
It is. It's the experience of having a fever dream watching that film for sure.
Yeah, that movie's amazing. I also
need to see Alucarda. I need to see Alucarda. Thank you for reminding me to watch Alucarda.
Yes. Have you seen The Devils by Ken Russell?
No,
but it's like really similar.
I'm more familiar with that than with Alucarda.
Yeah, it's very, very similar in that it's, you know, like a kind of religious psychological horror that explores kind of like the sexual liberation and oppression. But yeah, that's that's like a hefty double feature, but it would be, I think, objectively a good double feature.
I was going to say, I'll watch them together. I don't care. I mean, like, I watch weird shit all the time. Fuck it. Let's just go for it.
Go for it. Just like all in, it would be, I have not watched them together, but I'll do it with you if you do it.
Oh my God. Yes. Hold my hand while I
Zoom watch.
Gay The Devils. I feel like Alucarda is literally just the lesbian version of The Devils with more screaming, which is great.
I think you've just sold me.
That sounds like more my speed anyway, though. If it's like lesbian. Yeah, that sounds more like what I'm into as a horror fan.
The Devils, I feel like, definitely takes itself a little seriously. Alucarda is just like slightly more unhinged, which I appreciate.
I love the unhinged.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's for sure. So okay, let's transition to some creative stuff. Because I'm insanely curious about costume design, and I'm curious, how did you get into costume design?
Yeah, costume design was kind of a fun route for me to get into. I've always had an interest in fashion that sparked from my grandmother. She has like been, what did she do? I believe she was like, she has a very vague career path history, but I know it has something to do with fashion. I believe she was like a buyer for Nordstrom or something when she was younger, and then like was just like as a hobby, very like that's her number one thing is like sewing and fashion, and she just like fed me fashion history when I was a kid.
Did she have the best sense of style? Like, did she have the best clothes?
She did. Honestly, I was always just like, grandma. Like, she's really like, very like, definitely grandma chic, but like chic nonetheless.
Okay. I have a very good, clear picture of what you mean with that. So
yes. She's amazing. She's a very fun lady. And so she kind of ignited that desire for fashion in me and kind of that as a method of creativity. And then when I kind of got a little older, I was really interested in history, particularly just history, and archaeology. Those are, you know, things that I'm very, very fascinated with. And it was kind of like, I sort of had like colliding interests when I, you know, became an adult, where I was like, I really want to study history, but I also want to be a filmmaker, but I'm also really interested in like, I don't know, fashion and like where that can kind of intersect in history. And so that's when I decided to study costume design and fashion history. And just to kind of, I didn't really know where I was going with it, honestly. I think I had mainly done that because I knew that like when I was like, okay, when I make my films, I want them to be very visually driven. And for me, I had always had an appreciation for costume. And I felt that that was a really key element of films, especially horror, I think. And, so I just studied costume design. I found it extremely fascinating, and studying that in tandem with history, I think for me was really the key, because I kind of was able to get a deeper sense of like why people wear the things they do, and kind of like how the environments that people are in affect what they wear, both in like trends and on a personal level. And when I sort of transitioned back into like, okay, studying film a little more and kind of just working on low budget films, in Portland and that kind of thing, that's when I really realized like how important costume design is to film. And so that's why I spent a few years kind of focusing on doing costume design. And like meeting Hannah and doing Fanatico was just an absolute blessing, because we have like such a similar sense of style. We both love like retro stuff, and that, the fact that we also love horror movies, it was kind of a match made in heaven to do stuff together. And doing costume design for that was just such a treat, because I, through my love of fashion history, that's kind of why I was sort of like, I would thrift a lot and I collect a lot of vintage, and I really like, not only just because I think they're really fun, and I like to look like a clown at all times. I truly am just like, I look like a clown every time I put on an outfit, but but
a beautiful clown, a beautiful clown.
Thank you. I don't know. I really appreciate that clothes, I think, tell stories, and I've always liked, weird little vintage trinkets that tell stories, and clothes were a massive part of that for me, and developing that into, something that translates to film and making costume an integral part of the story, I think was something that became really important to me and my path as a filmmaker. And, even in films that I want to make where, maybe I'm like writing and directing it, I still want costume to be a central aspect of it, because I think, especially in the short film format, costume can be an amazing tool to move the plot along, because I really like telling a character's story through their costume.
Yeah, that was the thing that really jumped out at me when I first started watching Fanatico, was the perfect costuming of bringing to mind the giallo and the Italian horror era. And so I was kind of curious how it sounds like a lot of that might come from your fascination with like history as well as art, but how did you go about costuming that short film?
Yeah. So, Hannah, I believe we were actually like Instagram mutuals and like had some mutual friends before we did Fanatico. And she reached out to me about, doing Fanatico with her, just via Instagram. And that's actually how we became friends, was doing Fanatico.
That's
it was
amazing.
like, that was like why we, finally met up in person, which I'm sure we would have anyways and become best friends. But, we did because of Fanatico initially. And what was amazing is that Hannah and I both have a pretty good amount of like vintage stock, just like from our own closets. And so majority of that film was pretty much costumed just from like our clothes. And so it was amazing to be able to come together, because originally like Fanatico was kind of a one-woman show in the beginning with Hannah, and I'm, so grateful that she reached out to me and we were able to do it together. So she already had a few pieces picked out from her closet, and then when we kind of combined our collection, we were like, oh, awesome. Like we have a fair amount of options. And the kind of vision with Fanatico was that we really wanted to go sort of ambiguous with the year, so that we could kind of lean into some more campy, unique looks that evoked the 60s and 70s, but maybe couldn't necessarily be pinned down to a specific year. Unlike Camp Calypso, which is more specific to a year, Fanatico was a little more ambiguous. And so that did give us room, and was really a great, strategy for doing a low budget film, was not having a specific period, because we were like, okay, we can use this thing that we have that looks a little 60s, but her makeup's going to look a little more 70s or, whatever. And so we were able to pull a lot of different inspirations. And a lot of my inspiration kind of came from like, early 70s, like glam rock groupie culture.
Hell yeah.
And which is just like one of the sexiest subcultures. And just like super cool. And I wanted like that, but like make it Catholic schoolgirl, but also make it like clown, which is just my signature touch, I guess.
I'm gonna have to say, you definitely hit that.
Thank you.
It's very much, I love that. Yeah.
I think it's funny because, I believe it was Anna's costume, which is one of my favorites, which is the, blue-green dress. And she has this like wild, 60s eye makeup. And it's funny because I ended up hopping on as the makeup artist. And I would say I'm like pretty good. I've done a lot of the makeup in our films. I'm like decent, but I definitely had like a vision in my mind of what I wanted her makeup to look like. And it definitely turned out maybe a little more clown couture than I had intended. But I feel like it worked because it kind of played up our campy style.
I love that word. I'm laughing at clown couture. I love that. Oh, I love that.
It's definitely like, it like evoked like Twiggy, but like make it clown. And that, I don't know if that was Hannah's vision. I guess that's what I ended up going with. And I think it ended up, that was sort of something that helped develop our style was, we, appreciated kind of playing up different things where we could. And we were able to explore a lot of different things with Fanatico. And so that's sort of how we pulled inspiration. We also, Hannah and I both love doing kind of color coded costumes, or at least kind of having strong color stories. And so we kind of had an idea of the colors that we wanted each girl to evoke. And we really wanted to lean into that for Fanatico pretty overtly. And so that's why like Daria is like almost always in red and purple. And then we made sure that her bathroom was also red and purple. And so that was really fun to play with just because I love that. I love super strong color stories. And so we sort of did that. It kind of came together in the end. It was a really fun sort of ragtag experience. And by the end, I'm very proud of what we ended up with.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it looks fantastic.
Thank you.
Fanatico's on Alter, everybody. Go watch it on YouTube for free.
Yes.
But so also, besides Monstrous Femme, you have a little something else coming up. Actually, I think it might have been dropped by the time that this episode comes out. But can you tell us a little bit more about this new project you're working on?
Yes. And so through doing Monstrous Femme Films, I've kind of tapped back into doing a lot of like online content with the team, especially given, we haven't been able to make films, and put those into production. So, I've kind of tapped back into, my journalism roots, and have really enjoyed making online content with our Monstrous Femme Films team. But, me and Alex Hartwig, who is also, he's a writer-producer with us at Monstrous Femme Films. He produced Camp Calypso and then is also co-writing and co-producing Baby Fever with us, which is our next project. We are creating a multimedia horror and sci-fi thriller genre platform online. And we really want it to be a space to not only, uplift the voices of women, non-binary people, queer people, and people of color. But we also want it to be a space to kind of encourage people to be creative in this time where, a lot of us are just at home. And so it's going to be a platform where we're going to have, short stories. We're going to have, editorials and, like opinion pieces. And we're also going to host, a lot of like pre-existing content, and promote like podcasts and video series and video essays. And we're also hoping to do some like fun writing challenges and video challenges for the horror community, and to just kind of have an interactive platform that's sort of a community space for marginalized voices in the horror and sci-fi genres. So it's kind an expansion of a lot of the themes that we focus on in Monstrous Femme Films. And this will be, you know, kind of, a lot of the roundtables and stuff that I've been doing with Monstrous Femme Films. We'll be transitioning a lot of our online content to this platform as well. But this platform is not limited to just the Monstrous Femme Films team. We definitely want to have an open call. And so probably by the time people are listening to this, I'll probably have an open call out for contributors, out on my Twitter and on our Monstrous Femme Films account, that you can go check out for information on contributing. But yeah, I'm very, very excited to do this and kind of turn some creative gears in the process of not only just the pandemic, but in general, and kind of have a space for more content from marginalized voices in the horror and sci-fi communities.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. That sounds so cool. Oh my God, I'm so excited for that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So we have talked about your creative endeavors, Emma, but what movie have you brought with you to talk about today?
I have brought a little movie called Orphan from 2009.
Oh my gosh, Orphan. So for those of you who have not seen this masterpiece, Orphan is about a husband and a wife who have recently lost their baby, and they adopt a 9-year-old girl who is not nearly as innocent as she appears. To put it lightly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So guys, we're going to spoil the shit out of this movie as we always do. So, get ready.
This is a movie that's impossible to not spoil by talking about
it. That's true.
If you haven't seen it, put a pause and go watch it. I mean, chances are you probably know the twist anyway. I mean,
just watch that scene at least.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So before we talk about like the movie in general, give us your horror story. When did you see this movie? How old were you? Set the scene and tell us why this movie scared you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, watched a lot of horror movies with my dad. Don't mean to exclude my mom. She liked horror movies too, but she kind of would just like watch them and be like, I'm gonna go do laundry and actually I'm gonna not watch this. But she, you know, she attempted sometimes. But my dad and I, we put on Orphan like we did any other horror movie. I believe this came out in 2009, so I was probably in middle school. I think I was like 12, maybe. I was like 12, 13. And it, you know, like I had mentioned, you know, up until this point, I had kind of just sort of viewed horror as just like a kind of a fun genre, the same way I view sci-fi, you know, just kind of a fun escapist thing. I like the creativity. I liked, you know, all different kinds of stuff. But Orphan, when I watched it, I was genuinely disturbed for the first time watching a horror film. And it was definitely the film that kind of made me connect that horror could be very terrifying. It wasn't just fun, you know. I should take this shit more seriously. This is terrifying me. And yeah, I just really was quite jarred by it. And I don't know if like, what movies were out around this time? I don't know. I remember watching a lot of like jump scare movies that just like didn't do it for me. Or that it would be, but it would be like fun. Maybe like Paranormal Activity around this time or something.
So Orphan in 2009, I was 16.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. I was trying to do math. Math is not my strong suit. So I was 16 when this came out. And this was like peak me sneaking into R-rated movies with my friends times.
Yes.
And this was one of those movies that I snuck in to see with my friends. So this was like when like the One Missed Call remake came out.
Yeah, I see like The Uninvited, The Haunting in Connecticut.
Yeah, the Haunting in Connecticut.
The remake
Jennifer's
of
Body.
Prom Night, I think was around that time too. The remake of Prom Night with Brittany Snow.
That one's rough.
So,
yeah, we had this was like a bad time, I think, for remakes. Well, semi good. Like we had the Stepfather remake. We had My Bloody Valentine, The Last House on the Left. So we had some like remakes at this time, as well as like a lot of jump scares, like you're talking about. Oh, The Human Centipede. Ugh.
Oof. Yeah, that's a legendary one for that time.
Oh, Friday the 13th came out.
Oh, wow.
That remake. So yeah, a lot of remakes at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the year. That was like around the time of like very big like go to the theater and jump scare movies, and like grab to your
Beth.
like. What?
Wrong Turn 3 came out that year.
Oh, yay. Fuck that movie. But that was like the year, that was like around the time when I like was like, boy, come to me at the horror movie and like I'll hold on to you when I'm scared, even though I'm not scared and you're more scared than I am. But I like, this is my secret that I love this shit. And I'm actually the one dragging people to the movies. But yes, that is definitely.
I had a very similar experience with Orphan. What was funny about Orphan was that like, it stuck with me so much after watching it that I took Orphan in with me when I went into high school after middle school. And it was the movie I put on every time I had friends over or like invited someone over, or like date night. I would always make my friends, watch Orphan. That was the movie. No one appreciated it.
Emma, we are the same. We are the fucking same. This is like one of the ones I like bought. I bought this at Borders on DVD when Borders was still a thing at my mall.
Rest in peace.
And I was always like, would be the one movie I'd bring like to movie nights. Like I was always the chick of my friend group that would be like, hey, let's all have a movie night in my basement. And I would want to watch movies. Like, okay, they wanted to make out in my basement. I get it. But like, I also wanted to watch the movies. Yeah. So this would be like on top of the pile of things I wanted to watch. So I was very much an Orphan stan at the age of 16.
Yeah. I mean, I think it genuinely was one of the better horror films of that time. Like there was, they all had different qualities, but yeah.
So do you remember when you first saw it, what about it scared you? Do you remember like scenes and stuff?
There's definitely, of course, there's the twist at the end that people, know the movie for. It did. It totally surprised me. And it was, I don't know, maybe it was because of like, I was in middle school and that was like a really like, I don't know, controversial scene and twist that I was just like, oh my gosh, this is like forbidden. This is forbidden knowledge and a forbidden film that I need to show everyone. But there was also, I remember there's a scene when, the lead character Esther, like kills a bird, I believe. Oh, and that scene was graphic enough to make me remember this film. And also I'm questioning now why I wanted to see it so many times after. But
don't think about it too hard.
Yeah, it's fine. And then there's also a scene with, it's all like in winter. And so it's like icy and there's a scene with, a nun driving a car, I believe.
Yes, there is.
Where she crashes. And that was just like, I don't know. I think that was kind of a jump scare scene, maybe, if I remember correctly. But, yeah, I remembered that one. And those would be the scenes where I would be like, wait, guys, you got to watch this scene. Guys, wait, pay attention, please. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't.
So Terry, okay, this was your first time ever seeing this movie.
Yeah, it was.
And I want to hear all about your reaction and what your thoughts were about this movie. I've been dying to hear it.
I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't see it in 2009. I would have been 28 at the time. And I remember I went to a lot of movies then. I mean, half the movies that I listed off from 2009, I saw in the movie theater. So I don't know what it was about this film that I didn't go see it. I really have no idea. Obviously in the years since then, I think even the year that it came out, I knew the twist. And maybe that's what kind of like made me not go see it. Cause at that point, it was like, I thought that maybe the twist was all there was to it, or that like out of the context of the film, it kind of sounds ridiculous. She's actually a 33-year-old woman. Like, okay, you want me to go see a 2-hour movie in which the twist is that this girl is actually 33 years old? So it was probably something stupid like that. So I have not seen it. Even though I knew what it was about. So watching it last night was, it was a trip. It's one of those movies where I think back. Okay. So what it made me think about was in a completely different way, but it made me think about rewatching, The Sixth Sense, where you're watching it and you know that it's building to this twist. And so you have that knowledge. And so you start to look at other things in the way that it sort of unspools that sort of knowledge to you. And I found I was very pulled in and fascinated by this young girl who everyone keeps talking about, you know, she's mature for her age. So like these little hints and little signs that the script kind of interjects throughout it was like made me laugh a lot because I knew what it was building to. So the kind of like, oh yeah, she can pick things up. She's a piano prodigy. In my mind, I'm like, well, yeah, she's a piano prodigy. She's like 33 years old. So it was interesting. It was an interesting experience for me. And man, this movie, I'm going to be controversial yet brave.
Okay.
This movie is wild.
I'm so excited.
This movie is wild. Mm-hmm. There's that. How's that?
Yeah, that's very
good.
Controversial and very brave, Terry. Wow.
Brave.
Very brave. Wow, everyone.
Be strong with me in my time right now.
I'm holding your hand virtually.
So this movie grabbed me from the very beginning because we need to talk about the dream.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Can I start this off? Because this is the scene that scared the shit out of me. Okay. So this is I saw this movie in theaters with my friends. I was so excited. I had no idea about the twist. Like this was before I was like on the internet with movies all the time. So I didn't really know. I think there was a twist, but I didn't know the twist, which is what an exciting time that was, guys.
Yeah.
You knew there was a twist, but didn't know it.
Back when.
Rip.
Yeah. Nowadays we're talking about WandaVision like 30 minutes after it airs.
I have not seen one spoiler about that show, and I am avoiding it because one day I'll watch it. I know. I don't know.
I started watching just because it was getting spoiled.
You're like, I have to watch it now. I've been pretty good at avoiding the spoilers, I think. We just started watching it, and although, well, Alex actually has seen the spoilers and then won't tell me that he has actually seen the spoilers, and then we watch it and he's like, I knew that was going to happen.
I feel lucky, so I'm going to jinx myself now and see all the spoilers on Twitter later. But, so whenever I think of this movie, I do not think of Esther. I think of the scene where Vera Farmiga is bleeding profusely out of her, bleeding profusely. There's blood on the floor, and then she has a miscarriage. Yeah. And I had a very, 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 very intense fear of birth as a kid. Like, it disgusted me. I have not done any weird digging into that. I don't really get it. But it freaked me the fuck out. So that shit scared me so bad because I was like a weird baby. And the thing I always remember are the giant bloody forceps that they pass back and forth, which it happens for literally one second. And that image is what I think of when I think of Orphan. And I feel like maybe I'm probably the only person that ever thinks about that from this movie, but like it fucked me up.
Oh my gosh,
it really did.
yeah.
The opening of this movie that has nothing to do with the scary child who is not a child. So
I wish that scene had something more to do with the movie, because I think it genuinely was a very terrifying scene. And I think that, like, I don't know why that one doesn't stick with me as much, but it did stick with me upon rewatching recently. I watched it again a couple months ago for the first time in a couple years. And that scene really, like, totally jarred me when I saw it again as an adult. And I was just like, oh my God, like, I think I must have just written that off when I was younger, as like almost as if, you know, because it definitely doesn't feel super related. I mean, it is, but it gives, you know, context and, you know, kind of explains the characters a little bit more. But I don't know, that honestly is a very terrifying, impactful scene that, you know, Vera Farmiga does an incredible job at performing in that, because it's just, I mean, I can also imagine it's a pretty traumatic thing to perform. Like, that scene is extremely traumatizing, a traumatizing experience.
Yeah. So this scene is the one that on my first watch, really, like, I was not prepared for it. And
right.
Yeah.
cause in my mind, before it like became nightmarish, I was like, okay, so this is why they're going to adopt, because I knew that, you know, she was going to go to this thing. They're building up that this is her third baby. And obviously the baby is going to die because that's why she's going to go adopt. And so in my mind, I was like that, but then they're pushing her along in the wheelchair and there's a trail of blood behind her. And then I'm like, okay, this is wild. I don't know that this is up to code.
This seems a little messy.
and then she's up in the stirrups and the doctors are just ignoring her pleas and just like carrying on like, you know, oh, this is, you know, you're fine. This is great. You know, we're just going to take out your dead baby is basically what they're telling her. And then the husband comes in and he's like, just like, yeah, you know, this is, you're fine. Everything is wonderful. And it plays into the sort of paranoia that she's going to go through for the next 2 hours. It's a long movie.
Yeah.
But this encapsulates all of her fears in one very bloody moment. And the moment that they're like holding out this baby to her, and it's like, I think it was CG. Like it was Uncanny Valley, and it was making me really uncomfortable just seeing it as it was. And I think it might have been CG, and that's probably why, but holy shit.
Yeah. That scene was really intense, and I think it definitely is, you know, without that scene, I think that Orphan would maybe be more easily glossed over. And I mean, I guess, you know, people don't really talk about that scene. I mean, people do talk about the twist at the end, but that scene in the beginning, I think, you know, I almost wish I had, and maybe this is fucked up, I wish I had more scenes like that in the film. I think that would have made it a better movie. But that I appreciate that they included this scene because I think it does give you the context that you desire for the psychological elements that Vera Farmiga's character is going through. And I think that is, you know, even though on the surface it's just like, oh, it's a kid and she's an adult. There's also some darker elements and psychological stuff that Vera's character deals with as the mom. And I think that, you know, I almost wish they leaned into that more. But I also, I don't know, on the flip side, I appreciate that it was, you know, I don't know. I guess it wasn't subtle given that that was the first scene.
No, it's definitely not a subtle moment.
Yeah, definitely not subtle. But then it is like, it's weird. It's an interesting choice for it to be definitely weirdly subtle throughout the rest of the film.
This movie, watching it now as an adult and I have had two family members, like close family members, actually go through something very similar to what not like the awful dream bloody part, but like a similar situation of like having to give birth to a dead baby. Sorry, that's really fucked up to say, but and so it gave this movie like a very intensely sad tone that I didn't read at all when I was younger because I didn't have that like experience or that kind of perspective. But watching this now, like I do think this is a campy movie. I would love to talk about that, but I also think it's like deeply profoundly sad because Vera Farmiga won an Academy Award for this movie. I think she's stunning in this movie. She's so talented, but then I didn't really understand the whole like she's been buying wine and she's an alcoholic, but she stopped. And like, they do a really good job about talking about the things that have happened in her past because of her trauma and her grief between drinking and Max, her daughter, falling into the pond and her getting arrested because of that. Like there's all these like hints of trauma, but they don't try to play that up so much. I feel like a lot of the time these movies can get really exploitative with like, look at this crazy ass mom. But here it feels a little bit, this is obviously gets into the crazy ass mom territory, but they don't go as full hog exploitative than they could. Yeah. Which I appreciated just because like as someone who has had like close family members lose babies like this, it's like, it's a really awful hard thing to process. Like it is fucking horrific. And it's just like the way they portray it, and especially her relationship with her husband, I also feel is actually pretty interesting and realistic at first until Esther comes into the picture. But I thought that like just watching it as an adult, it's like, wow, this movie is much sadder than I ever would have thought as a teenager, which is sad. Yeah, but anyway.
It is. I completely had the same experience of not really understanding the melancholy tone. I just knew, I was like, it felt different when I was a kid. You know, it felt different to other horror films and I couldn't identify really why. And then, you know, I'd gotten so numb to showing all my friends Orphan that, you know, upon watching as an adult, it is really striking how much of a melancholy film this is. And I kind of do, you know, it's subtle, but I kind of appreciate that, you know, they show her trauma in the first scene and with those little hints throughout the film. But, you know, her character in like the present moment might not necessarily be presenting all that trauma in the kind of like crazy mom tropey way. And I kind of appreciate that because that's more realistic.
Yeah.
It's kind of showing that her trauma is something that, you know, she carries with her, but it doesn't always present to the, you know, to the world, outwardly like, you know, she's not always screaming about her trauma. She never does. She never really, you know, I mean, she definitely does scream, but she never really, you know, she's not having constant outbursts about her trauma. She's kind of dealing with it in more subtle ways. And then, I don't know, it definitely feels more realistic for sure.
Yeah.
You bring up a really good point because one of the notes that I took while watching this was the way that the script talks around the trauma, where it doesn't, no one really gives you a complete breakdown of what happened. You can make assumptions that because of the loss of her baby, that it drove her to alcoholism, and it was the alcoholism that sort of culminated in the almost death of Max. But the script doesn't really come out and just talk about it. It doesn't do that sort of exposition dump that a lot will do. And I expected it to happen when she goes to meet with the psychiatrist, and it doesn't happen there. Mm-hmm. It's just in conversations that you pick up because of the way that the natural conversations happen between a husband and a wife about past events. And so that really, like, I was really impressed with the way the script kind of handled that, where it forced the viewer to basically keep up with the trauma and fill in the blanks on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think that they actually did that quite well. And in retrospect, I'm kind of, you know, on a surface level, it's kind of like, oh, I wish they, you know, leaned into certain aspects more. But if you look at it from, you know, a different angle, it is actually done really well. And the way that they go about trauma, I think, is definitely more respectful than, you know, a lot of other films might go about that kind of theme.
Well, and so this is a funny thing to me because I think there's a lot of melancholy and it's like trauma and grief in this movie, but I also think this movie is also very campy. Mm-hmm. I don't know if either of you read it like this, but I, especially towards the end, especially with these reveals after reveal after reveal of Esther being evil, Esther not being adopted from Russia, Esther being an adult, and the entire time she's dressed in these like beautiful fabrics, like frilly dresses, and her hair is put up in beautiful ribbons, and she wears velvet ribbons on her neck, and it's just this like feeling of everything taken to a ridiculous extreme that is like almost breaking the possessed child trope and turning it up to 11. Like the way she talks, her accent, her outfits, and the way that she tries to seduce the father at the end when she's wearing the red lipstick and the black eyeliner. It's just this whole, especially the last half, is just this camp wildness, which is so good because I don't think it realizes it's camp. Which is like the essence of what Susan Sontag talks about with camp, is like they don't know, and that's what this feels like to me. Especially like this all out brawl in their house towards the end. It's just like this is such a campy thing. It is ridiculous and fun and just fucked up and wow. I just want to talk about that because I couldn't stop thinking about this movie as camp.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, especially you bringing up the costumes, like her costumes are camp, 100%.
Oh,
it's hilarious that they're leaning into like why would she, even if she was an adult, why would she be wearing those dresses? Why would she be wearing early 1900s period dresses? It makes no sense. It's leaning into that just for the, you know, creepy child thing, but it's like that in reality of the time period of the film, it makes no sense, which is wonderful. And, you know, also with the costume, was it her wrist or something? There's a scene that she like presses her wrist or something.
She has ribbon, she has velvet, a velvet choker and matching bracelets that cover up where she was held when she was in a mental institution and where she was like against the restraints. And so these beautiful, beautiful, like velvety pieces of jewelry are what she has chosen to cover, which that could be a whole paper in itself, in the concealing of these like of this like controlling of the female body through feminine whatever. Sorry, I'm getting like very into this all of a sudden, but like it's so good.
I'll be honest. If I didn't know the twist, I would have expected, because like halfway through the movie, I'm like, why does she have this necklace on? Is this like, is this the story that we would always tell around campfires about the girl with the necklace? Then, you know, she grew up to be an old adult and then they take it off and her head falls off. Like that was playing to me, even though I knew that wasn't going to happen. But it seemed to be leaning into all of these little. In some ways, this movie feels like the ultimate, you were talking a little bit, Mary Beth, about the possessed child thing. And I feel like this movie is leaning all the way into those tropes where you have a girl with this necklace on and she won't take it off. She won't let people see it. Why is that? Well, it kind of ties into that kind of folklore tale. And, you know, you have like the evil dreams from the beginning that kind of give it this a sort of like hellish feel to it. Like, is there something supernatural going on here? So like, I think it plays off in these different directions. And then it also brings up the I think it's from the 90s, The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin.
Oh my God, yes.
So it's like,
that movie fucked me up, Terry.
So it's like bringing in all of these tropes, but then kind of digging into what you're talking about, Mary Beth, at the camp. The last 30, 40 minutes of it, I would say, kind of pulls from the erotic thriller, oddly enough, of the 90s with the cradle. What is it? Cradle Will Break or Cradle Will Fall or whatever. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle from 1992, or like Single White Female, or like just those kind of erotic thrillers, because spoiler alert, she's a 33-year-old and she wants to fuck the father.
Right.
Like, so the way that this movie somehow manages to marry creepy kid, erotic adult thriller into 1 2-hour mishmash is wild.
Yeah. No,
it is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And like, especially, I guess one of my favorite, like, weirdly campy parts is when she's playing like Tchaikovsky really well at this like giant piano with like a little girl. And then the mom walks in, she's like, what the fuck? She's like, I didn't tell you I didn't know how to play piano. Like, it is just so funny in the most darkly fucked up way. And it is her line after that, though, like, I wrote that down and like highlighted it because she's like, well, it must be frustrating for someone who has a son who isn't interested in a daughter who can't even hear.
Oof.
Like, whoa.
Punch.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's intense.
Just one more thing on the camp aspect before I lose it. So the other thing that made me think about camp is the destruction of her own art with neon paint, like neon blacklight paint.
That was weird, right?
It's so weird. So like, we're introduced to Esther. She is going to be adopted by this couple. The couple has lost their baby. They meet her when she's painting these like super cool weird things. It's like flowers with faces, these like they're actually very cool looking paintings, but they don't look like child's paintings. They look like an adult painted them. Surprise, surprise. It's because she's a fucking adult. But so plot twist. But so when she's at her new home, she's painting again. But then there's this huge fucking reveal at the end where they turn off the lights and somehow the black light from the fish tank reveals that all of her paintings, it is incredible that it's a fish tank. It's absurd. Again, camp, guys. Camp. It reveals all of her paintings actually have these horrifically awful murder scenes painted on them, and beneath all of them,
classic.
Beneath all of the murder paintings are portraits of her parents having sex.
Oh my God.
It is I forgot this moment and I was like, this might be one of my favorite moments in cinema because it's so goddamn, like, after Peter Sarsgaard has downed an entire bottle of red wine in 5 minutes and smoked a cigarette, is seduced by his 9-year-old adopted child and comes up and just sees portraits of him and his wife fucking in black light paint.
In black light. That's so funny you bring that scene up because I think when I was like a teen, that scene sort of like glossed over me. But upon the rewatch, I was just like, why the fuck is this a scene? Like, why the fuck is there one, like, where'd they get blacklight paint? Like, I'm like, and I also just found it really funny that almost feels like a scene that was supposed to be like a bigger, like, it feels like the blacklight is a really random aspect of this film. It does not match the tone or style or production design of this film whatsoever.
Nope.
But I also found it funny that, like, that one, like, weird-ass, out-of-place, tiny aspect of this film was also like the Blumhouse logo that they had in the beginning of the film was like the black light paint all over, like as if that was a massive theme in this movie, when it's really just like a few weird ass random scenes.
I'm glad you bring that up, because like the Dark Castle theme shows, or sign shows up, and then it's splattered with this ink, and then some of the other movie logos and everything, and I'm like, why this is a choice? And then I completely forgot about it until the very end of the movie, and I was like, oh, but this has like nothing to do with anything else.
Nothing. It's reveal. So funny. I'm like, it's like suddenly the room looks like we're like in Drive, when the entire rest of the film was like winter muted gray, super gray 2009 horror film. I just don't understand the choice.
With the most expensive house ever.
Yeah,
I was going to say, that's a really good way to jump into their house, which is like, again, when I first saw this movie, I was like, does this kind of house actually fucking exist? Like, this is not a real person's home. Yeah. Especially when they walk into like the greenhouse area where it's like a jungle of plants. I was like, who has a house like this? And I know that he's an architect, I guess, in this movie, and she used to be a piano teacher at Yale. But like, this is not a house for children. This is one of those houses you see in like a magazine and you're like, no one can live there. It's all right angles and sharp corners. Like, how could a person
especially
live
then
there?
Like, especially in 2009, like no one had houses like that. Even now, it's like the whole like contemporary, like weird angular square house that like makes me want to tear my head off is like still relatively rare. And like 2009, it was like a future home.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I just like, I'm a pianist. I did piano for a while. I was lucky enough that my dad, cause he played in the band for the Air Force, and he's played piano all of his life. He had a baby grand piano, so I'm lucky that I played at one. But I'm always fascinated by that. And this is a Steinway and Sons baby grand piano, which it will set you back at least $25,000.
Oh God, that's a house.
No shit, that's $25,000.
$25,000 at least $25,000 if you were to go buy a Steinway and Sons baby grand. And I'm like, that is the piano that she's teaching Esther how to play. Like.
Casually teaching my child.
Yeah, it's not adding up.
No, and actually, so this is a question I had watching this movie, because I was like, this is not what an American family looks like. You know, you always have this like the like mom, dad, 2.5 kids, a dog, a front lawn, a white picket fence. Like, this is like the anti that, in terms of the house being like kind of scary looking and humongous, and the entire property is like huge and full of danger with the pond and the treehouse. But then something I got like really into my own head is that, what does it mean to have, like, it's almost like this is a home, an American home, a new American home being invaded by an outsider, because we all know that the U.S. has a very tumultuous history with Eastern Europe and Russia, and she's very, very much. She's from Russia, or Estonia is when they have revealed, but she's from that region of the world, which we have a lot of tumultuous history with. And she is the one invading the U.S. American family to be part of that American family and replace the woman, which is something I never would have caught on as a child, like ever. But watching it now, I'm like, this is so fascinating. And like having a Russian woman trying to break down the American family, even though it doesn't necessarily look like the traditional American family, and infiltrate it and make it her own. Like a parasite. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I wonder why they made that choice about the house, because certainly it took some time to find a location. I'm wondering how intentional that was, or if they were all just like super rich making this film and they were just like, yeah, we'll just use, Barry's house, and it just happens to look like that. Or
it reminded me. It reminded me of the house in Hereditary. You know what I mean? Like, it's far off the road. They have to go up this road. There's like this huge like fields, and then there's the tree house. And it just kind of reminded me of that weird, like, really beautiful house that doesn't totally make sense, but like it feels very uncomfortable and is in the middle of nowhere. It kind of gave me that vibe too.
I'm so glad that you brought up Hereditary, because when I watched it again, I was honestly like, Orphan gives me Hereditary vibes. Like, I feel like to some degree, Orphan walked so Hereditary could run. Like, I feel like, you know, even down to like there's like a treehouse involved, like little weird details. But I was just like I feel like Orphan was a really like hallmark of modern psychological horror that, you know, maybe got washed down a little bit by other more recent modern horrors that are a little more just like jump scary, like the Insidious type thing. But I feel like Orphan was one of the first kind of contemporary horrors to kind of go full force into that psychological realm, and that Hereditary probably, and maybe not directly, I feel like maybe took some inspiration from the way that film was made and the way it portrayed, and also the way they all just have really weirdly nice houses. And I don't know if that's symbolic or if that's just like we needed a big house.
I think about that too much with movies, with the houses. I focus on the house. I love that. I love architecture in movies. I have no architecture background whatsoever, but I love beautiful houses that I'm like, and then I just get too into my own head about them. So I have no idea, but it feels
it's something
purposeful
to think about. I mean, I like the idea that, you know, there is some symbolism to a house that doesn't necessarily look like what you would expect, you know, an American home to look like, or like the classic family life. And that, I don't know. Or maybe there's some sort of symbolism around the fact that the family is really wealthy and they're kind of being intruded upon, from other sources. And I don't know. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but maybe.
Well, what jumped out at me, and you kind of touched on this, Mary Beth, is the fact that Esther is from Estonia. And like, she's originally said to be from Russia. And I started thinking about this time because like Hostel came out like 3 years earlier, and there seemed to be like a fear of Eastern Europe in horror movies around that time period. And of course, I'm drawing a blank on some other ones, but that seemed to be, that xenophobia definitely seemed to be, well, unfortunately, it still is today. But back in that Bush administration era, it seemed like that was sort of like, and I guess at this point we're moving into Obama's tenure, but like coming out of the whole Iraq War and coming out of that very xenophobic decade, it seems like this movie in some way is still holding on to that kind of xenophobia in a way.
Yeah, well, and I agree, because a lot of post 9/11 horror, like, you know, I know we're in 2021, but like there's no way to not look at horror like without a post 9/11 lens, especially in 2009, and how it expanded from that kind of xenophobia from the Middle East to expanding to like all of our enemies, basically, and like kind of trying to extrapolate that fear. And it's more than just like outward violence and attack, but like an infiltration. And I think that this movie kind of really does tap into that anxiety of like secret infiltration and destruction from the inside.
Well, and even like the idea of like the Cold War back in, you know, when we're like the stuff that's talked about in the TV show The Americans, where it's like there were operatives from Russia that were being, you know, placed among the US. Like it definitely kind of feeds into that kind of idea. I mean, yes, this is a little bit more localized, where it's not a Russian invasion. It's one woman from Estonia coming in, but there's definitely that fear of the other that is coming in and replacing American households that film seems to really dig into.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also kind of like, I think that with any film, thinking about, you know, you can't really ignore the socio-political environment that film was made in, and those influences, I think definitely come through. And especially with, you know, not only a lot of films in that time sort of having that sort of same fear and exploring that same fear, whether it was consciously, like directly or not, you know, I think is definitely a part of it. And also that, like, I think that there is maybe a problem within horror films, where and I guess maybe just films in general, oftentimes, there's, you know, outsiders are seen as sort of the, quote unquote ethnic flair that films will put on a story to kind of make it more interesting, which I think, which I've studied a little bit more through like a Jewish lens, where oftentimes you've seen a lot of Jewish characters in horror films will be either it'll be really subtle, or if it's overt, it's usually like, oh, they made this character Jewish, but not to explore Jewish stories or look at it through a Jewish lens or have anything to do with Jewish lore or tradition. They're truly just doing this to add, flavor and make it a glorified exorcist, but with it's like a Jewish character. And so, I've been thinking about that lately. And I think it could be, it's a similar thing to think about with Orphan, where it's like, did she have to be Russian? Did she have to be, or did she have to be Estonian? And I think obviously like they do, I think this film does explore her background fine. I think they do I don't think it's necessarily problematic by any means, but it definitely is an interesting thing to think about at large. The ways in which, horror films particularly, use, cultures, and different people, and how they utilize them. Yeah. The others, and then who are they vilifying, I think is interesting to think about, because oftentimes, there can be people that are vilified that maybe shouldn't be. And you're kind of like, why are we vilifying them? But yeah, I don't know. That's maybe just a general thing that I think about sometimes.
Well, it's true, especially because, like, when we watch horror movies that were released, even just 2009, isn't that long ago, but you watch it and you're like, okay, this is a choice that I never would have thought about then, but now I'm like, oh, that feels purposeful. Or, like, even if it wasn't, like, how could you have not thought that through? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you watch those movies and you're like, you really didn't think about what you were doing when you cast this person as this race, or you had this person, this character be a certain, like, from a certain culture. Like, that has meaning. Like, even if you didn't see it, it's going to have meaning to someone who watches it. And so I think it's crucial to talk about.
Yeah. Especially, and maybe it is something that evolves through time. And like you said, like retrospectively, we can identify certain things and identify how maybe, oh, like that seems like really weird that they casted this white girl as like the monster of this movie and she's playing an Estonian character. That can definitely be seen as problematic, but certainly, I think a lot of people could also say that the film is done well and they do handle that carefully, or at the very least not in an offensive manner. But I do think that, it's like something that does evolve, and when you're kind of like, you might not realize certain, things that are influencing your film. Like they might have not realized how maybe that could be seen as problematic, but also how, that kind of the sense of the others, they maybe didn't think about that. And it was just something that was so ingrained in like the kind of, the fears of that people did have at the time. Whether that read as problematic or not, a lot of people like did have those fears. And so technically like they were tapping into that. And so I don't know, it can be, it's like a complicated topic, but I think it definitely is a worthy discussion, to kind of think about, especially in horror where, generally it's kind of like the theme is there is a monster or a villain, that is threatening normalcy. And I think it is important, to think about, what is the thing or person or culture, that's being represented that is threatening normalcy, and what is normalcy.
Right.
Yeah, because like, could they have had her been an orphan from the U.S. and not Russia? You know what I mean? Like, and,
right, exactly.
But we shouldn't do what ifs because like obviously we'll never know. But it like you said, it's interesting just to think about like why that specific choice was made. But totally. Terry, what were you going to say? So
one of the things that I think the movie does really well, though, on the positive side, is the relationship between Kate and John, the husband and wife. I loved their relationship. Pre-Esther. Of course, Esther comes in and fucks everything up.
Right.
But like the way it presented two fallible people who have both done something bad in their past, and they're trying to like move on with it, worked really well for me, but just also the playful intimacy between the two. There's a scene early on where she's in the bathroom, he comes in and he's shirtless, and she just sort of like leans into him and starts smelling him and saying, "You smell good." And it's like this moment that's like, oh, these two feel like they have a shared history and like just sort of a playfulness between them. And then you see that later on in the kitchen scene where they start to like fool around and it turns to sex and she accidentally headbutts him and they're laughing. It's so playful yet erotic.
Mm-hmm. My favorite moment is when she said, fuck, you have to do something about it. And they were talking about it. He's like, fucking do something about it. And he goes, all right, bitch. And they're joking because my partner and I do that. Like one time he walked into our apartment and like, he's like, he didn't know our roommate was home when we lived with a roommate. And he's like, sup, fucker. And then he looks at our roommate and was like, oh no, hi, sorry. It's so silly, but like, it's just like that one little joke. I was like, that is what makes it like this relationship, like you said, so intimate and sweet. Like those silly moments when you're messing with your partner and just like saying dumb shit. And like being goofy and I really did appreciate that. And that's what made it even sadder when like Esther started pushing them apart because they had this like pretty solid, I mean, despite, he cheated on her. She obviously, she went through, they were grieving their lost child. She's an alcoholic. Max almost drowned, but like they're trying.
Yeah. Well, and what I really liked was, I really, Peter Sarsgaard his character doesn't get a whole lot, honestly, to do in the film. It's mostly centered around Kate and her perspective. But what I did really like was the scene on the playground where the horny neighbor comes over and she's like kind of like flirting with him, which, I mean, girl, same. He's hot. This is like hot dad alert. I get it.
Absolutely.
I get it 110%.
Cannot blame her.
No, but the way he respectfully dodges her advances, I thought was really interesting because he's at first like he sort of laughs it off and she is like being kind of flirty, and then she makes a stupid comment about well, I have a chair, I need you to move, and he's
hilarious.
He laughs, but then he turns it where he's like, well, maybe Kate and I can help you out. So like. It's like just a very quick line where it's like, he's obviously trying to diffuse a situation and get away with it and get out of it. But he says, Kate and I will help. Like the way that line is written and delivered just like was a perfect encapsulation of who this person is, how he's trying. He knows people are going to flirt with him, and he is somehow able to push it off in a way that reminds her, I have a wife. And if you need help, we will both help you with it. But it's not I'll come over and, it'll turn into a porno or something.
Right. He knows he's sexy. He definitely knows he's sexy, but also that I do love their dynamic. Like, I think that Kate and John have a very realistic dynamic, which I think, like we talked about earlier with their, with the trauma that they explore with Kate, seeing that you can experience trauma and still have like a functioning relationship, a loving relationship. And I think Vera and Peter have an extreme amount of chemistry in this. I think it's fantastic. And they just really perform their asses off. And that's something that people, I don't think, talk about enough with this film. They really kill it.
No.
Like, they do a wonderful job. And I think I read something about how Vera wanted to do this film because she wanted to act with Peter. Like, she wanted really badly to work with him. And I feel like that comes through too. Like, I think that they were excited about this project and that, just excited about acting and bringing these, characters to life together. And it created a very like harmonious performance from them. And, I forgot how much I appreciated, their dynamic. I think that it does bring a realistic element to this film, which is funny when you think about the campy elements of this film and then like the moments where it does feel very real. It's a very confusing film now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay, that is because I was watching it and I was like, why do I want to write so much about this fucking movie that like no one talks about anymore, but like deserves so much more attention? Because there's a lot more going on in this movie than I think any of us gave it credit for. In 2009, I was sitting here like, I have so many thoughts. Like, this is so complicated and both campy and really endearing and sweet. And it is a very complicated movie in the best way. And now I remember why I love it so much.
Yeah, I know. I'm having like the same experience where I'm like, actually, there is a lot. But like, I didn't have awful taste in 2009. Like, it was like a pretty decent movie. And
it wasn't bad.
It was like, I definitely realized like it certainly feels a little disjointed because it does kind of feel like 3 different movies, but it also, you know, I don't know, maybe that's the camp element where I'm like, this is reminding me of Hereditary, and now there's black light everywhere, and I don't know why. I don't know, like sometimes it reminds me of like Fatal Attraction almost in like a weird way. And then like other times I'm like, I don't really know what's going on with this kid. Like this just feels like, I don't know, like a Goosebumps episode almost of like high camp. It's very interesting.
It is, because I was watching the end and in like where my partner and I work, and he looked over, he's like, are they still fighting in the ice?
Yeah, they are. There's a long ass scene.
He's like, how is this woman not getting overpowered? I know that the child is 33, but how is she not getting how is she still getting overpowered by the young girl? I don't understand. And then it was just he was just watching it like, this is such a bizarre movie. I'm like, yeah, it is, but it's amazing. Like the long ass fighting on the ice scene. It's so good.
That is like an erotic scene.
It's like erotic thriller, like 2 women fighting over a man.
Right.
That's kind of the end of the movie, like really boiled down to its most simplistic. It's 2 women fighting over a dude.
Yeah. Honestly, that is what it is, which is like kind of a bummer, but also like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, I wish it was more than that, but I guess you also do have that element of Kate's trauma that is personal to her. I do wish that maybe it didn't revolve around him as much. And maybe that's the part where I did wish they brought in more of her past and her experience, because in the end, it does kind of end up just being that, you know, we're fighting over this guy. And I think it loses a little bit of the meaning, the deeper meaning behind her trauma and her experience, when it then just becomes about him, because I do think that experience that we see in that first scene and we see throughout in bits is so much more than just having that partner. And like, sure, he's a great partner and he's very loving and like, yeah, I'd want to fight for him too. But there's so much more to the story, I think, that, I don't know, gets kind of lost after, you know, you have this kid who's not a kid dressing up like an adult in what I also think is another campy costume, like you'd mentioned, the red lipstick and the black dress, which, you know, could also be on an entirely different tangent, could be explored as to, you know, I think the costumes could be read as, you know, symbolic of many, many things. But, yeah, I don't know. After that scene, it kind of loses, I think, a little bit of the original, meaning. Yeah.
And it is weird because it's like, and I feel like there's a disconnect there too, because Esther wants to seduce the dad, but then also Kate wants to protect her family and her husband. But then when they're fighting at the end, it's like they are fighting over the husband because Esther couldn't give 2 shits about having kids. Like she tried to kill one of them, and the other one she's just like has her as her little minion. So if you like, you can see Kate fighting for her family and having it be this whole like epic motherhood message, which is another lovely horror trope that we see so often.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
But also, once they start to like really get going and fighting, like husband's dead.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna say. And they're fighting over a dead guy, which is like tragic and also a little bit funny because I'm fucked up, but it's like a little funny. Really. Because like, Esther, honey, there's nothing left for you. No. Like, where are you gonna go?
That's true. I mean, well, yeah, because you're kind of like, okay, she doesn't want kids. She only wanted him. He's gone. What is she doing? Like, what is the point?
Burn the house down and start over again.
Maybe she wants the house. Maybe she wants Kate's life or something, where she's like, okay, well, if I can't have him, let me at least start over in this very nice, strange house with the nice piano.
Or like just destroy them all. Like, like I can't be part of this and none of y'all can. Like that kind of thing. Like destroy the evidence. Because she did do that. She did arson at the beginning with the family that wouldn't accept her. So like.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is like her MO of like trying to get with the dude. And then when that doesn't happen, she just burns everything down and kills everybody.
Yeah.
That seems to be like her MO.
Yeah.
Now there is I just want to bring this up briefly because as ridiculous as this plot sounds, this was actually a case from 2018 or 2008. So it would have been a year before the movie came out, about a woman who was 33 that had disguised herself as a teenage boy in Norway. And she apparently had like escaped some abusive family. And I'm still unsure. I've read a couple different reports that maybe she had manipulated the previous mother into abusing her 2 kids. And then once things got like bad, ended up like skipping town, and then ended up like getting taken in by this other family that thought she was a 13-year-old boy, but she was actually a 5'2" woman who had shaved her head and was doing binding on her breasts to pretend to be a 13-year-old boy.
Oh, wow.
There was also that case in 2019 about the woman who claimed her adopted daughter was 33, not 16, and that was a whole complicated drama that was like way not very straightforward at all. But I remember that people were like, Orphan is real, and they were like, no, actually, this woman might be a little bit harmful, toxic as a human, and is trying to get this younger person in trouble. But Terry, you bringing that up just made me think of that case from last time.
No, I found that case too, and I was like, that one is like a weird. I don't know what is going on there.
That's like a saga. I don't even know really how it ended. All I know is that I was happy to see people talking about Orphan.
Yeah,
right.
As far as my googling shows, she's not a grown woman. She is 16. And she spoke out, but I haven't obviously read very far. So listeners, if I'm wrong, I apologize. But the latest news from late 2019 seems to say that she came out and said, "I swear I'm 16. I'm not 33. I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah, and that thing kind of brought into like the parents are trying to say that there's bone density reports that showed that she was an older woman, but like then it was later shown that the bone density reports showed a normal kid at that age. Like, it's just really weird. That story is very bizarre.
It is.
I'm curious though. So you said the one in Norway was in 2008?
Yes. And I'm curious if that kind of inspired. I mean, you can never really tell, right? But like, there was a website, I'm not going to name it because they're just clickbaity, that was using this as like their inspiration, that's where the inspiration for Orphan came from. I don't know if it's true or not, but I did find a CBS News report about this woman who had moved. She had pretended to be 13 in the one family, and then she was looked at in this article as a key witness for that mother abusing her 2 kids. In another site, it said that maybe she had manipulated the mother into abusing the kids. I don't know where the truth is that, but the CBS News report talks about that family. She was posing as a 13-year-old girl and was adopted. And then in this next family is a 13-year-old boy. It's just wild.
I mean, I definitely could see, I mean, it seems almost like a too weird of a coincidence for that to have happened right before they made Orphan. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy that this could happen. Yeah, very specific. Definitely could be where they got the whole, like, the orphan is foreign thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could definitely see how that could happen. And it does make it, I don't know, a little more jarring to think about, oh, this could actually happen. And I mean, part of the film, the fact that it, it feels very real. There's not really any supernatural elements going on, already makes it feel a little more real, which is why it scared me so much. But, the fact that this kind of thing actually is happening. And I wonder about undocumented cases of, things like this, that seem, I don't know, probably not super common, but that it even could happen is very terrifying.
Well, I also remember at the time, there was like a lot of backlash about this movie because people were afraid that it was portraying adoption in a bad light. And so I remember that being like a big thing. There was like a big stink about this film because of that aspect.
Yeah, this film definitely, I think, there's definitely some questionable things about this film. I think that the adoption thing is one of them, and their handling of that is one of them. I'm curious about, what the intention was. And of course, sometimes the intention isn't how it's read, and, how it's read is more important. But yeah, I definitely think that could be a cause for problem where, you're portraying adopted children as the monster and as the villain, and how, if you adopt, you're going to come home with someone who's
murderous Estonian.
Yeah, with a murderous Estonian, adult. But, I don't know. I could definitely see how that could be problematic for sure.
Orphan, huh?
Orphan, huh? Right? A lot to talk about. Very confusing.
Lot to talk about. Very confusing. Yeah. Very good. I think.
Very good. Very good.
I'm going to talk about this movie more again. Thank you for leading to we're going to call this the Orphan Renaissance. That's going to coming very soon. So, let's give us a rating. Each give us a rating out of 5. Terry, how many surprise 33-year-olds out of 5 do you give Orphan?
Surprise! I'm gonna give it. I think 4. Honestly.
Okay. Yeah.
4 surprise 33-year-olds out of 5. I think Orphan. It's a wild movie that somehow manages to combine a heartfelt examination of trauma and grief with ridiculous camp and twist ending. Like I'm still in awe at the kind of balancing act this movie manages to hold between those two halves. I think it's wild. I think it's a lot of fun. I love the little homages that we talked about in our discussion to the erotic thrillers and to the way it talks about possessed children or that kind of evil child like subgenre of horror. I think this movie is a blast. I'm glad that a lot of people are talking about it more. When I tweeted about this film, I got a lot of likes. So I think people are reappraising this film in ways that maybe weren't done back in 2009 when it might have been just written off. I'm really curious about this prequel that's coming out where it's actually filming.
I'm also very curious about that.
The same actress as Esther, but now she is 30 something. So I'm really curious to see how they're going to do that.
Yeah. That'll be interesting. Also, I believe it's the director is different, which I was curious about, and I saw that it's the same director that directed The Boy and The Boy 2, which is
oh shit.
It's a little questionable, but definitely something I watch in the same way that I watch Ghost Adventures, where I'm like, this is so bad. I love it.
Yeah, so I'm curious about that. I think this movie is a lot better than I would have given it credit for at the time, and I am really glad that you brought it to us. So for me, it is 4 surprise 33-year-olds out of 5. What about you, Mary Beth?
I would also give it a 4 surprise 33-year-olds out of 5. This movie was one of my favorites growing up. I forgot about it for a long time and thought it was just another relic of my high school horror loves. And I come to realize that no, actually, it is much deeper than I thought. It is a much more poignant film than I could have ever expected, and also a much campier film than I ever expected, which is why I think I love it so much, because it is so sincere and so ridiculous, and I can't help but absolutely become obsessed with a movie that is trying to combine all of those things into one beautifully entertaining package. It's such a blast to watch again, and I laughed and I gasped, and it was just so much fun to watch again. So I definitely give this 4, and 1 star off for a lot of it's eccentricities that are a little bit harder to write off as just fun. Yeah. But Emma, you have the final word. How would you rate? How many surprise 33-year-olds do you give Orphan out of 5?
I think I'm going to go with 4 out of 5 surprise 33-year-olds, 35? 33-year-olds for Orphan. That's going to be my number. This film, I think you both said it best, and I've come to appreciate it so much more upon an adult rewatching. But it's on a personal level, a film that I kind of helm and talk about a lot as kind of a turning point for me in my horror journey. And I grew a personal love for the genre in a new way through this film. But also, yeah, I do think that, albeit its problems and, controversies, I do think that this is a really good film. Like, I think that this was certainly looked over. I'm very excited to see people talking about it again. And yeah, I think it's a film that explores trauma in a really interesting way, and in a way that, it's very fascinating to me that it can do that so well, but then also bring in such extremely campy elements of, you're having the possessed child and in the frilly dress, and, and then it's kind of like evolves into just all these really weird scenes, like the black light thing, but then you also have really like jarring scenes, like tightening of the velvet collars, or the scene with like killing the bird, or but then you also have Esther, saying crazy shit.
Oh my God.
Towards the end.
When Esther sneaks into Danny's room and says, what's the line?
Cut your pecker off before I even know what to do with it.
Yes.
Yeah. I just like, how can a movie have so many elements? That is my question, and why I love it. I think that, like, to some, I think that could be a fault, but I think that this movie somehow does it really well. I don't know how, I think taking a star off for the fact that maybe it does feel a little disjointed, but I kind of don't care. I kind of like love the fact that it can bounce from like kind of really intense psychological horror to like, what the fuck is this campy horror doing in this psychological horror movie? And then I'm like, wait, I love that we're doing both of those things. So yeah, absolutely love this film. Very intrigued also about that sequel. But I can probably already tell you that I'm always going to love Orphan 2009 more.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emma, for joining us to talk about Orphan and finally getting me to watch it. I really appreciate that. So where can our listeners find you, and what do you have coming up that you can share?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PythonPatsy. You can find my horror collective on Twitter at Monstrous_Femme, and our Instagram is at Monstrous Femme Films. And yeah, from me, I'm going to be producing, costume designing, and art directing our next Monstrous Femme Films short, Baby Fever, which is directed by my co-founder, Hannah Mae Cumming. And then right now, I'm in the writing stages of the film that I'm writing and directing, which is going to be my debut featurette. It's a queer, psychological, surrealist horror, going to be entitled Penny and the Poppies. It's hopefully going to be going into pre-production this fall. I'm very excited.
Yes, please.
all of the words you said got me very excited already. So it's like, let's make this happen.
I'm so excited that you guys are excited about that. I'm very excited. I'm hoping to bring some interesting visuals to life, and also explore queer relationships and psychological elements in that film too. It's going to be like a retro 60s period piece, which will be fun. And so hopefully I can build upon the stylistic choices I've made in our previous films, and really just nail it in with this one. That's my goal. And so, yeah, Those are the films I'm working on, and you can keep up with me online. And hopefully I'll be writing some more pieces for our online platform as well, that are horror and sci-fi centric and looking at things through a queer feminist lens.
Beautiful.
So, but listeners, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with Orphan? You can send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on Twitter. I am at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gailey Treadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe.
Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Somebody please think of the children.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.